This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. Heating and cooling equipment are the biggest users of energy in American homes, and homes are responsible for about 1/4 of the nation's total energy use. But there are surprisingly simple ways to deeply cut energy use, its effect on the environment, and its cost. David Peabody and his team at Peabody Architects design passive homes. He says the design of a passive house aims to reduce energy demand to its lowest possible level. Passive houses use no solar, geothermal, or wind energy equipment, but they are extremely energy efficient. Mr. Peabody says passive houses cut heating and cooling costs by about 90%. But what sets his design apart from other green homes is that it looks like any other home. That is the beauty of the passive house approach, is that you don't have to build in a particular way with any particular materials or to any particular style. That's why, in our case, we decided to try to do something to prove that point, to make something that was very traditionally American. Peabody Architects says it is building the first passive home in the Washington, D.C. area. In Arlington, Virginia, Roger Lynn and his brother Eric are also building one. Roger Lynn of Southern Exposure Homes explains that windows are sealed against leaks and have 3 layers of glass. The windows are airtight. On a cold winter day, the temperature inside the unfinished home is a comfortable 12 degrees Celsius. David Peabody says you can find passive homes all over the world. North Africa, for example, has a passive house community designing for very hot, dry climates, and that's a whole other area of exploration for passive house. The first passive design was an apartment building in Darmstadt, Germany. 2 physicists helped develop it about 20 years ago. Passive houses use some specialized materials. These include precast concrete panels and insulation. They also need to have special air treatment systems. Supporters say they cost only about 5 or 8% more than traditional homes, but they use 10% of the energy for heating and cooling. The designs are passive because they do not use geothermal, sun, or wind energy for power. But Passive House Institute US says even greater savings can be reached with additions like solar water heating systems. They might call that an active passive house. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. Pressure for financial reform has been building in Europe. In June, the financial services company Moody's Investors Service reduced Spain's credit rating. The rating was cut from A3 to Baa3. That means that Moody's officials believe the credit risk of Spanish debt has moved from very low to moderate. The company said it acted because Spain is borrowing about $125 billion in rescue loans for its banks. Debt markets punished Spain by pushing up the interest rate on its long-term debt to about 6.8%. That increases Spain's borrowing costs and hurts its already troubled economy. Spain was not the only country to get downgraded by Moody's. Cyprus got the same treatment. Recently, American Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner spoke at the Council on Foreign Relations in Washington. He said the increase in borrowing costs for European countries like Spain means European officials must move quickly to avoid growing costs. In his words, if you wait to move in these things and you let the market get ahead of you, then you increase the costs of the solution and you make it harder to get there. Once you decide, he said, there is no argument for doing it slowly. Germany, Europe's largest economy, has been pushing for economic reform in the 17 countries using the euro. But German Chancellor Angela Merkel has argued that her country is unwilling to put money at risk unless banking reform is enacted throughout the Eurozone. She warned that Germany's economic power was not unlimited. In early June, the European Commission proposed steps toward a common banking policy. The proposals include empowering nations to intervene when their banks are in trouble. But proposed changes may also bar support for failing banks. Some European leaders are pressing for an expanded European bailout fund. Germany has resisted providing new financial resources. But details of any deal with big European economies have yet to be decided. Europe's financial crisis is likely to be a major international issue in the weeks to come. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. You can read, listen, and learn English with more stories about economics and other subjects at voaspecialenglish.com. This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. Today, we look back at some of the top stories of 2011. In Europe, the debt crisis that started in 2010 in Greece and Ireland spread to other countries. Portugal needed a financial rescue, and Italy needed a new prime minister. Silvio Berlusconi lost his job over Italy's debt problems. Former European Union official Mario Monti replaced him in November. Pressures on Europe's financial system called into question the future of the euro. European finance officials called for greater cooperation and new rules. World Bank President Robert Zoellick said Europe would have to find its own answers to its debt problems. Europe has to rescue Europe, okay? And it's very important. If there's any message when I'm asked, well, what can the US do? And what can China do? The best thing they can do is clean up their act at home, be a source of growth at home. Mr. Zoellick also said it was important for other big economies to deal with their own budget imbalances. The downgrade of America from AAA didn't affect the finances today, but it may be one of those events people look back on 10 years from now and say, did they get the warning? In August, a credit rating agency cut the United States credit rating from the highest level, AAA to AA+. Also in August, Steve Jobs stepped down as chief at Apple because of his failing health. He died of cancer in October at the age of 56. He brought the world the iPod, iPhone, and iPad, and helped make Apple into one of the world's most valuable companies. 2011 will be remembered as a year of protests. Revolutions for political freedom swept North Africa and the Middle East in the Arab Spring. But protests over budget cuts and jobs were heard around the world. In the United States, activists in hundreds of cities protested economic inequality and joblessness. Protesters were angry that banks got rescued with taxpayers' money during the financial crisis nearly 4 years ago. But many Americans continue to face hardship. Anger over government budget cuts led to protests in Greece, Britain, and elsewhere. And in southeastern China, villagers in Wuhan rebelled against local officials they accused of illegally taking land. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. If your New Year's resolution is to learn English, we can help. Find out more at voaspecialenglish.com and on Facebook, Twitter, and iTunes at VOA Learning English.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. Are you a saver or a spender? A penny saved is a penny earned. This old saying calls attention to the wisdom of saving money. Putting money away for a rainy day is another way to talk about saving for the future. People who hate to spend money are known as tightwads, while those who like to get the most value for their money are called thrifty. A thrifty person is different from a spendthrift. A spendthrift is someone who spends wastefully. People like that are often said to spend money like a drunken sailor, or like there's no tomorrow. In the United States, people who want to start a savings account have different choices of where to put their money. These include banks and credit unions. Credit unions are cooperatives for people who have some kind of connection. For example, the members might work for a university or a government agency. Most credit unions are non-profit organizations. Credit unions, banks, and other financial institutions pay interest on savings accounts. But the interest rates are low. Certificates of deposit pay higher returns. For a certificate of deposit, or CD, a person agrees not to withdraw the money for a certain period of time. This term could be anywhere from a few months to several years. Longer terms and larger amounts pay higher interest. People can withdraw their money early, but they have to pay a penalty. Another way to save is through a money market fund. This is a kind of mutual fund. Mutual funds invest money from many people. The money is sometimes placed in short-term government securities. Money market funds, however, may not be federally guaranteed like other kinds of savings. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation guarantees savings up to $250,000. In a number of countries, people have been saving less over the years. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development is a group of 34 countries. The OECD says in 1990, Americans had a household savings rate of 7%. This year, that rate is expected to be a little more than 4%. Many European countries have higher rates, but Americans save more than families in countries like Japan and South Korea. For VOA Special English, I'm Mario Ritter. To read, listen, and learn English, go to voaspecialenglish.com. You can also find our captioned videos at the VOA Learning English channel on YouTube.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. Americans gave about $290 billion to charity last year. That was $10 billion more than the amount of charitable giving in 2009. The estimates are from the Giving USA Foundation and its research partner, the Center on Philanthropy at Indiana University. Charities are nonprofit organizations that raise money to provide social services or other programs. Giving USA has been reporting on charitable donations since 1956. The group estimates that about 75 million households gave to at least one charitable organization in the United States last year. A household is one or more people living in a home. The largest share of charitable giving goes to religious groups. Giving USA says they received 35% of all donations in 2010. Some people give a percentage of their pay to religious organizations. Schools and other education-related organizations were second on the list. They received an estimated 14% of all charitable giving last year. The Federal Tax Agency, the Internal Revenue Service, recognizes donations to official charities. Those who give to charity may be able to get tax breaks and reduce the amount of taxes they owe. People who give to charity may want to know how their donations are being spent. Organizations like Charity Navigator and the American Institute of Philanthropy look at how charities spend the money they receive. Their reports and ratings offer a measure of how effectively the charities use their money. For example, donors can learn how much a group spends on services compared to how much it spends on itself in administrative costs. Charity Navigator recently asked donors and charities to answer questions about year-end giving trends this year. More than 500 donors and 100 charities completed the questionnaire. On average, these charities said they received 41% of all their donations in the last few weeks of the year. Charity Navigator also asked donors about the kinds of charities they would likely support this holiday season. Human Services rated at the top of the list. Arts, Culture, and Humanities rated at the bottom. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. Read, listen, and learn with our programs and English teaching activities at voaspecialenglish.com and on the VOA Learning English page on Facebook. From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. North and South Korea reopened their joint factory zone recently. Lines of trucks and cars crossed South Korea's northern border on the way to Kaesong, North Korea. About 800 South Korean workers and their supervisors entered the jointly operated Kaesong Industrial Complex. They brought materials and parts to restart production for the first time in months. South Korean managers expressed happiness at returning to work. Ji Yoon-tae is deputy chief of a South Korean company in Kaesong. He said it was very hard while the factories were closed. From now on, he says, he hopes everything works out well and the factory zone comes back to life. In April, North Korea removed about 53,000 workers from the joint manufacturing effort. Their withdrawal resulted from military tensions with South Korea and the United States. South Korean companies say they lost about $1 billion from the suspension of work at the factories. The industrial area produces cloth, watches, and parts for electronic products. After months of negotiations, the two Koreas reached a deal to reopen the area. They agreed to set up a joint committee to settle future problems. Officials from the two sides have been holding weekly meetings to discuss other details. The reopening is seen as the most important sign of warming relations between North and South Korea since the North carried out missile and nuclear tests. Choi Kyung-lim is South Korea's Deputy Minister of Trade, Industry, and Energy. He told reporters in Seoul that the government hopes many Chinese companies will invest in Kaesong. China is North Korea's closest ally. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal. This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. Today, retirement can mean different things. For many Americans, it means the end of the money-earning part of their life and the beginning of a period of enjoyment. But retirement calls for planning and savings. In many countries, employers may offer some kind of retirement savings plan. The plan could be linked to the company's stock or to a managed investment service. Almost any financial planner will say workers should use these plans to save money easily, often directly from their wages. But an employer plan should not be your only way to save for retirement. Pete DeRuta heads his own financial planning company and gives retirement advice on radio shows and television. He tells people to save whenever possible. But he says as retirement nears, you must take fewer financial risks. There's 3 stages of life there when we look at it. There's the part where you're earning money. And when you're earning money, if you have a salary, it makes it easier to take risk because you know that if you lose the money, you can go back and earn some more. By risks, Pete D'Arruda means investing in stocks and other financial instruments that can lose value quickly. He says people should move money away from riskier investments as they age, even if there is a possibility of a higher rate of return. Instead, investors nearing retirement should seek more secure investments for their savings. But then we get to the transition phase, when we're within 5 years or so of retirement. I call it the financial red zone, because now is the time when you need to protect what you have. You need to start transitioning away from the risk of Wall Street and into safe places that guarantee lifetime income. Pete D'Arruda has a simple way of deciding how much of your retirement savings should be at risk. He says, take your age and put a percentage after it. That is the percentage of your retirement savings that should be fully protected from losing value. So, for a 65-year-old, 65% of the money must be in a place that can't lose it. The reason why is when you're in retirement, it's impossible to get the money back that you lost because you don't have a salary coming in. One recent survey by the Charles Schwab Company found that 44% of baby boomers feel secure in their readiness for retirement. Baby boomers are the generation of Americans born after World War II. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. In December, the Japanese electronics company Olympus made a public apology. It said company officials hid over $1 billion in losses going back to the 1990s. Olympus said it was investigating and considering legal action against some of its current and former officials. The company's stock lost half of its value between October and December. The problems at Olympus seem to come from thinking more about declaring profits in the short term instead of building real value. This was one of the issues considered by management expert Peter Drucker over his long career. Peter Drucker died in 2005, but many of his ideas remain very meaningful today. Drucker liked to share his knowledge not by answering questions, but by asking them. He once said, business people must not ask, what do we want to sell, but what do people want to buy? He taught at the Claremont Graduate School of Management in California for over 30 years. He advised companies on business methods, and he wrote 39 books on business and economic ideas. Peter Drucker was born in Austria in 1909. In the late 1920s, he worked as a reporter in Frankfurt, Germany. He also studied international law. He fled Germany as Adolf Hitler came to power in 1933. Drucker spent 4 years in Britain as an advisor to investment banks. He then came to the United States. In the 1940s, Drucker argued that the desire for profit was central to business efforts. He also warned that rising wages were harming American business. He was later invited to study General Motors. He wrote about his experiences in the book, The Concept of the Corporation. In it, he said that workers at all levels should take part in decision-making, not just top managers. Later in his career, he warned that businesses that seek only profit growth help their competitors. Peter Drucker received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President George W. Bush in 2002. He lived a long life. He died at the age of 95. Drucker was a voice for change and new ways of thinking about social and business relations. He used terms like knowledge workers and management goals. Many of his ideas have become highly valued in business training and politics. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.